Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line with
Anna Letitia Cook.
Good morning, and this is Beyond the Bottom Line. My guest today is Scott Robinson. He's a finance professional, a qualified mindfulness and meditation and yoga teacher, corporate well-being advocate, all the things that I really admire, and specializes in offering yoga and meditation services to finance professionals under the brand of YogiBanker. And I highly recommend it as well because I do his classes in yoga. They're brilliant. His background is in the financial sector in the City of London, and he helps to run the employee-led mindfulness and yoga sessions at Deutsche Bank in the UK, of which he's a director. And Deutsche Bank is actually one of the largest financial groups in the world. So welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line, Scott. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you, Anna. I'm very well, thank you. It's great to be here on a Monday morning with you.
Good. So today we're going to talk about performing well, achieving goals, managing pressure, and the benefits of corporate well-being programs, because I know it's really one of your specialities. But you work in what's traditionally a very high pressure, stressful sector, investment banking, which I know because I worked in that many, many lives ago. So can you tell us more about the challenges of managing the pressure in this and any other types of really high pressure industries and what we can do to make life easier? So, I mean, these sectors, just how bad are they to work in?
It's a really interesting question. I guess phrasing how bad it is to work in. I think if my employers were to listen to this, they'd have a different perspective.
Okay, sorry. From when I worked in corporate finance, I remember it was very, very stressful. Have they improved? Should I put it that way?
I'm joking.
Have they improved?
No, they've certainly improved. I think at least I probably wasn't around.
Mine was in the
earlier
80s.
days, but I think
before you say I'm too old.
The 80s. I was still at school then, in primary school. So I think,
God, thanks, Scott.
It's I've said that. I think it's interesting. The industry has changed. I think that there's more focus on values and integrating the way we do business better. So since the financial crisis, there was a massive shakeup. Obviously, the financial crisis in 2008 was largely caused by irresponsible lending and structuring of financial products based on very poor credit quality of underlying mortgages in the US and so forth, which caused the whole financial system to explode. And I think then people started to look at things relating to short-term incentives and long-term performance and employee compensation and so forth. The real shift towards changing the culture. Now that's more of a long-term vision, I think, because bankers are still motivated by pay. That's a large reason why people work in the industry. It's a relatively speaking, it's a high-paying industry. But with that, obviously, there is a cost in terms of people's time and an effect upon people's well-being. And I think that part of the challenge of working in these industries is the extremely tight deadlines people have. So often sometimes deals need to be agreed upon within a very short period of time. Now, that may be for a very good reason or otherwise, but there's a lot of pressure placed upon people to execute transactions in a short period of time. And that has a knock-on effect upon not just bankers, but also the support staff and consultants and lawyers and accountants and everyone else who actually is involved in agreeing that deal. And I think what this leads is this pressure that emanates across the whole institution, or collectively speaking, and it creates a very challenging, stressful environment because deadlines, you've got a lot of complexity and often a lot of money involved, and those three factors together create a lot of stress. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people have is trying to find the time to actually negotiate and review and actually do these deals. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on people and affects their well-being.
And so what can we do? I mean, just in the industry itself at the moment, what can you do to try and manage the pressure and to try and make life a bit easier? Because when you're in that type of environment, you can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to have a long lunch and I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to work shorter hours, because it's not an option. And a lot of people in many normal jobs, I mean, I say normal because it's not quite the same salary, etc., but they do have commitments that their bosses just will, well, I don't think it's their bosses will not let them do it. Their bosses can't let them, have a shorter day, etc., because the company's still got to exist. So how do you think we can go around trying to manage pressure better and to make life easier, even if we're in a difficult situation?
I think really good question. I think it all comes down to culture.
Yep.
I think that there's a couple of things. One, leaders themselves coming out and obviously wishing that the company would perform, or leading and influencing the performance of the company, but also providing a safe employee culture. It's one thing to, provide yoga classes and meditation services and so forth, but unless in effect you're encouraging people to attend, saying that actually that's overall part of our culture, the way we do things here at the institution, then in effect actually you're going to see well-being being integrated as part of the overall organizational culture. Yeah. And where culture and well-being are separate, it's what your efforts on the well-being front are going to be less effective, because people may not attend, or shall we say, there's maybe the reputation, or there's a stigma attached to that, or so forth. I think in effect that the culture needs to support well-being.
Yeah.
So they feel that what they do is integrated as part of their daily life at work, as opposed to completely separate.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So YogiBanker, you've created that. It's a specialist yoga and meditation service, and particularly for financial professionals. So what inspired you to create it? And what's been the reaction of the finance professionals who take part? And what was the initial reaction when you started? Because I'm sure there's been an evolution. But again, me having worked in the financial sector many, many moons ago, I know some of my wonderful colleagues would have had a heart attack at the thought of yoga.
Really good question, Anna. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I mean, what inspired me for this was simply just I had this urge to write. I enjoy writing, and actually this initial inspiration wasn't necessarily about yoga, or there was influence of a yoga, obviously, but there was more about things like holistic medicine and things. Everything I've been kind of experimenting with in my mind or in my body up until I started yoga with. Actually, my story of YogiBanker, this yoga actually started with things like energy medicine, Reiki, meditation, acupuncture, Pilates, and then the yoga came quite late, relatively speaking, in my well-being journey. And so I started a WordPress blog and started to write, and then I got my first break, I guess, in the media and Balance magazine, which used to exist up until recently, and then I actually came out. I was always like undercover. I was this YogiBanker. My profile picture, I just had this kind of avatar, and I was like, I would cover yogi in the bank, right? And I was like, and then I decided to come out, and actually I'm Scott Robinson, and I do yoga, and I work at the bank, and then the journey just blossomed since then. And I think it's been relatively well received. I think that what really inspired me for YogiBanker wasn't necessarily my own moment of enlightenment. I'm going to bring yoga into the financial industry. It was actually a sense of, I go on a retreat, or I go to a workshop, or I go to class. You work for Bank of America, you work for Goldman Sachs, and you're interested in this too. Oh wow! So there's lots of us out there.
Yes.
I think there's quite a few people these days. Probably less so, probably more so, probably Anna, when you were in the city in the 80s or 90s. I think there probably were some yogis there. They're probably
I know,
more
champagne and going drinking. That was it.
Champagne,
yeah.
Champagne yoga. Yeah. I think Anna, that there is more people who are interested in alternative spiritual and holistic ways of living now. And I think that's become through more exposure through the media, through online and so forth. And people are just interested in that and exploring. And I think it's consistent with the overall theme of well-being becoming more and more important, or shall we say, people becoming more interested in well-being topics. And I guess that's naturally going to have radiate out into the financial industry.
Yeah.
So actually, and even at Deutsche, there are lots of bankers I know who are interested in yoga meditation.
Yeah.
Some of them come to my classes. Some of them go privately or elsewhere. So it's been relatively well received, I think.
Yeah.
People like it because I think, although I don't work in the front line in terms of working in corporate finance or structuring or trading, I deal with these people all the time. Yeah. I understand the pressure they're under. I understand the deals. They put pressure, or shall we say, there is pressure involved in the work that I do because I'm supporting them. Yep. So I understand the pressure they're under. I understand the complexity. So there's a sense of relationship between each other in terms of we understand each other and I understand them. And so I bring what I know from the yoga on the yoga mat and otherwise to them. And then there's a sense of connection.
Yep.
And I can relate. I was chatting to a client the weekend, and he was sort of saying, how did you get so far in your yoga career? And I'm finding it really difficult in terms of managing being more resilient. I want to find better ways to help me cope. And I said, yeah, I know exactly what you're like, what it's like. I've been there. I know the people. I know the industry. I know the environment. So that gives a sense of comfort to clients that I've been there. Yes. And I can relate to what you're going through, and this is what works for me. And if in effect you show commitment and turn up to...
Hang on, Scott, I've lost you. Okay, perfect. Back again.
Great.
So, can you remember what you were saying to continue?
Yes, I was talking about that, the difference, say, between never having worked in the industry and then bringing something to the industry in terms of, understanding what it's like to work in the actual industry or within the institution. And I think what my clients like is the fact that, I can understand what it feels like to work in these places. I understand the characters, the people, the type of work, the pressure, the institution. Yeah. And I think once you develop that sort of understanding and connection, then clients feel like they have something for which, they can work towards, or they have a method. I think bankers specifically are looking for techniques, they're looking for ways, they're looking for means which they can help cope and become more resilient.
Yep.
And while sometimes I don't necessarily like to think about yoga and meditation as tools, I think, though, that the entry point to a lot of these practices is through the body and maybe the mind, and practices that they can cultivate and develop. And that, at the end of the day, if we can help people become, less stressed, more flexible, stronger, help them do their jobs better, become more resilient, I think that's great. And I really enjoy working with people and seeing the difference in their bodies and minds.
Yeah, because, when I was doing it in the 80s, they were really nice guys. They weren't horrible people that tried to put you in a slave house. They really did want to help. They wanted everything because they realized help and support, and people being happier was obviously better for productivity and a good atmosphere and people having fun. But it just, back then, they didn't think of things like that. They thought of give them a nice holiday, give them a weekend away, take them out down to, pub crawl, all the champagne bars, blah, blah, blah. That was just the automatic thought about how to help someone and how to de-stress. Go and get pissed. That was
complete.
That was the reflex. Yeah.
It's a reflex action. It's kind of like, it's almost like giving someone a paracetamol or, try and sort of dull the pain or otherwise.
Yeah.
And actually the end effect of that actually may be worse because of the symptoms of, or the hangover from alcohol.
And alcoholism and God knows what.
Alcoholism and everything else. It just feeds upon itself. And I think, we are seeing a real change in mind shift. It's always interesting to me that, when people say what it's like to work in the industry, and, there's a reputation of the industry associated with, I guess, alcoholism, maybe drug use, and so forth. But I've never come across that.
I did
I always
back in the 80s. Yeah, both of them, alcohol and drugs.
Drugs.
I remember one lovely little colleague who used to disappear into the loos to, the old white powder.
Yeah, maybe I just wasn't.
You're too young.
To that. Too young. But I guess my point, Anna, is this: is that I really felt that the people I worked with were really bright, really focused.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to do your job well in terms of the work I'm currently involved in, or have been, in terms of very kind of complex, challenging, demanding type work.
Yeah.
Drinking or consuming drugs, to me, I couldn't see that. Can't see those two going well together.
No. You need a clear head.
Need a clear head.
Yeah.
So, but that said, that obviously the stress builds up and so forth. And
exactly.
I think going back to how what I've been doing has been received, actually, I get a lot of casual smiles. I get people admire what I do. I think it's a sense of, as you said, it's brave enough to come out. I think people, comment what I post on LinkedIn about me in yoga doing a suit. People enjoy that. It's entertaining on that level. But I think if I can inspire others to do that, and I have seen that, firsthand, people coming to class as a result of seeing what I post or do, and that to me is what it's all about. If I can inspire others to really change their lives.
Yeah, exactly. So from the point of view of corporate, because obviously you created the well-being program and the yoga with Deutsche Bank. How did you approach them, and why did they support it so strongly? Because obviously it's, from their point of view, it's very positive, it's giving advantages. It's not just for the love of the yoga that they're doing it. They must be seeing that it's really helping all the employees, and they must have heard what you were saying to want to do it. So from corporate's point of view, why does it help, and why was it so well received by them?
Yeah, really good question, Anna. So I think it's been a bit of a journey on that level in terms of bringing what we've done to the institution. I'm more on the yoga side. I think the meditation side was relatively, go for it. I think with the because it's just simply just, it's people attending classes. They can dial in and listen or practice. But obviously, when you're working with the body, obviously there's occupational health to consider. And then there are also some corporate health service providers already with Nuffield who provides those classes. So initially I was doing it off-site, and then the bank, and I was running classes when people used to come in, and then the bank, I think in 2019, was going through a significant transformation, and glad to say that transformation has been a success. But I think at the time there was significant pressure upon the institution, upon the well-being of people, and it was just felt, what can we do more to support our employees, to improve morale and well-being and so forth, and actually created the space. The issue with these institutions, if you've got a building which has been around for a long time, where do you host these classes? Yeah, exactly. And we were fortunate to find some places, and it was like, right, please go and do this, or you I know you wanted to do this, now's your opportunity. It was almost like a light bulb had switched. What can we really do? I think when times of crisis, there are opportunities, and I think that where we kind of took advantage of, but kind of just were given that opportunity at a particular time, a unique time in the bank's history. The bank had just exited equities trading and so forth, and there was significant changes going on. And so and I think it was also at the time when the bank really started to think about well-being in a more structured way. Yeah, the bank has created pillars of well-being, so physical, mental, social, and financial, and it was starting to get all more organized well-being. So it would start to produce surveys. So people would say, what are you interested in? There were working groups on sleep, nutrition, finance, etc. I would go along and offer my thoughts on that. And so there was a real sense of like, hey, let's get more organized in well-being. And so yoga was just a lot of people think about yoga and stress. So it was kind of, that seems more natural. And actually, one of the things that's been great is that actually they do these people surveys or these surveys regularly, and actually came out, do you participate in these employee-led yoga classes and mindfulness classes? So, the fact that it's kind of integrated, and also the fact that I'm volunteering my time, I'm doing this, actually I donate, anything we receive goes to charity as well. We've raised about £10,000 for charity. So obviously, wow. I mean, these classes aren't free per se because Nuffield was offering classes, and so to not undercut Nuffield, it was like, well, if you do these classes, you should ask for something. So we decided to ask a de minimis amount, but anything we would receive would go towards charity.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, so we sort of were quite innovative. We used the bank's Charity of the Year ticketing page, which is designed for ticketing for charities events, and that became our yoga classes administration system, and people would book their classes through there. So it all worked really well. So it's been well received. I think that, there's obviously more work to be done. I think now the bank has just appointed a global wellbeing head, which is the first. I think like related institutions, well-being has been it's where it sits in HR, it sits in corporate services. It kind of, it's not really, or shall we say, officially. Some people some institutions are more progressive than others. But I think Deutsche has evolved a lot. And there's now, it's got pillars of well-being, and now it's appointed a global well-being head. So my vision is to incorporate this more into our everyday life at DB.
So I mean, do you see that this can be introduced into other companies relatively easily? Obviously, the charity organisation part maybe not, because you already had that system in place. But I'm thinking about other companies or organisations that are thinking about introducing well-being. Basically, what other aspects of well-being do you think could be easily incorporated into their system? And if they wanted something like meditation classes, yoga classes, they just need the physical space to do it. Well, for the yoga, for meditation, as you say, it can be online. How complicated is it practically for them to do it?
So I guess another really good question, Anna. So I think other aspects of well-being, we're talking well-being generally. So we're talking, mental health is really important. Burnout, stress, but dealing with anxiety and depression and other related mental health topics. So I'm a mental health first aider. I lead sessions on a weekly basis, or shall we say lead sessions, talking about topics on well-being. Last week we talked about a topic on medication and how do we feel about medication and mental health, and the week before was on suicide prevention and all these things. So it's kind of providing a forum or a community for people to exchange ideas and listen and talk about these topics. In terms of what institutions could be doing, I think, we're now moving into worlds of hybrid. It's the new kind of buzzword, So, you've got, two people working 2 or 3 days a week at home, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the institution. So that brings its own challenges. But with challenges that are opportunities. So, for example, if you can't offer yoga in person, you can offer yoga classes virtually. That's been one of the biggest successes. You come to my classes and, you're based in Wales and I'm in London, it works, So basically anyone could be anywhere really and attend a yoga class at their own time. So, meditation can be done virtually. I lead the classes weekly. obviously yoga. So I think I think the new world that we're in post-pandemic, or still in the pandemic, moving towards the end of it, hopefully, is that, with the new world of working, the need to have physical space to do classes may not be as, shall we say, as a priority as it was prior to. Obviously, having classes in person is great, but that might not always work for people.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. So, okay. And anything else that you want to add? Any final piece of wisdom or any key strategy that you think we should keep in mind to help us going forward?
Yeah, really good question, Anna. So I think for me, it's about well-being. It's about persistence and being consistent. Persistence breeds results, I think, in my view, and being consistent with your practice. Yeah. Turning up week in, week out. I know that's a little bit of, Indian kind of like, you must come to class. But what I mean by that is actually, if you want to sort of, achieve something with your well-being, it requires some level of dedication to your own practice.
Yes.
I've seen that with my students coming in, week out, and seeing the real change in their bodies and their minds. I think, secondly speaking, when we think about well-being, we also think about community, the social aspect. It's important that people get together, create forums, join communities, join groups. I think that what I've seen work during the pandemic, especially, is that participating in weekly calls on topics relating to well-being.
Yes.
Where people can listen, people can share, people can contribute. Where actually, collectively speaking, we can realize that we're all in this together. We all have our own unique issues, and by listening and talking with others, then in effect, actually, we can process things in a different perspective. That to me has been really important. The power of community. I was just doing a training on the weekend, and this whole idea of just collective energy, where we can tap into that, and actually, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
If we become isolated, which a lot of people have during the pandemic, that's when we start to see mental health issues start to arise. Yep. If in effect we more create a community where we come to class, where we participate in calls, we really focus on our well-being on a sort of a social level, then in effect actually we feel better as an individual and as a society.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's brilliant.
No, you're welcome.
But I totally agree with that, because I work from home, and the majority of the time, but coming to your classes, even though it's on Zoom and I just see sort of little shadows, it's just, you feel that you're together, you feel like you're a group, you get the spirit. So it makes such a difference. It really does. It's brilliant. Anyway, Scott,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for all of your advice, all of your expertise, giving us a sort of an insight into what it's like in really high power and high pressure, and how we can transform that. And also, I think talking about the hybrid way of working, things like that, it makes it so much easier for other companies who've been interested in doing something like this, but never really known how to do it. So great advice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Anna.
Have a lovely time. Enjoy the day. And I will see you in yoga on Thursday.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you. You've been listening to Beyond the Bottom Line. Thank you very much to our guest, Scott Robinson. Thank you to everyone for watching in. And don't forget to come again next week. Bye.